Hello, this is Kim Nelson, a professor of jewelry design at FIT. We're going to do a video today. I'm doing a video that's going to go into how to sketch loosely a dome ring. This will be for further videos which will go into 3D modeling a maquette for this ring. I don't know if it's the latest color ring, oval, faceted stone. Rest of it should be fairly straightforward. First thing I'm going to do is create a separate layer to be working on, and clearing the background here in Photoshop. That way I can drop the opacity, which will make my drawing a little easier for me to see. And I'm going to add a layer to draw on. Okay, for this kind of a sketch using Photoshop, it's very easy for me to be able to come in here and activate the symmetry tool. Zoom in a little bit. So I can get that right on the center line, or at least as close as I can. Okay. These indicators don't really, as far as width, doesn't really matter. The effect, the drawing guide will still work, no matter how narrow or wide those are placed. So I'm going to start drawing. My favorite pencil would be, this is a good one, Kyle's Happy HB works well. I don't care to work really dark. I like my colors here to be more of a pencil-like gray. The brush is set very tiny right now. That's so that I can do fine line work. But for sketching, I can use a larger brush. So first thing I want to do is get a sense in the flattened top view of what I might want that to look like. Do I want it to be that wide? Probably not. And that brush is a little heavy. So, by the way, this on the template, these are 1 millimeter apart. These are 2. So the 2 millimeter shank is kind of a standard for bridal, which is how this template was devised. Okay, maybe something like that. Now I could set up the symmetry to do top and bottom. That's not really necessary for what I'm doing. I can tell you that I do like to work with my paper rotated. Drives me crazy to draw straight up and down. So you're going to have to bear with me on that. Also, when I'm sketching, I prefer to use a keyboard shortcut on my alternate button here on my stylus. So no mouse button, Shift plus X. Okay. All right. That'll allow me to alternate between foreground and background color when I'm drawing, which allows me to come in and draw and erase as I go with just clicking a button to refine things, which is helpful. Okay, I think that's a pretty good indication of what I would like to do. Nothing terribly fancy. Okay. So coming back in now to do this is the flattened top view. To do a traditional top view, I am going to engage a dual axis symmetry tool. Once again, just making sure I place it as accurately as I can. Now, there's something you want to be aware of when you're working between these templates. This point is halfway down the shank, which is equivalent to what we have here and what we have right here at the edge, okay? So bearing that in mind, what I've drawn here is a little bit narrower you can see the relationship. A little bit narrower than what we have there. And what I have at the top and bottom is extending out almost a millimeter, almost this distance. So, and allowing for a thickness of material because this will never come off of like here. It's not going to happen. You need to imagine that this is actually, what you're seeing in here is actually the finger bore. Corresponds to this. So inside of the ring, you would have that going on, but we don't see that in our sketch. So, but we need to have a little material here. And now I can drop down to a detailed pencil. So that's my top view. Okay. Now coming down here, I have my front view. This was a template that was just laid out to give me enough room for the depth of this stone. I don't have to stick with that if I don't want to. I haven't decided if I want to yet. I don't need to have multi-axis or dual axis symmetry anymore, so I'll go back to simple left to right. For whatever reason, it is easier to position this with a mouse than it is with a stylus. Okay, so I have to decide if I like this kind of an elevation or not. The cross section of that, which is a good thing to look at, would actually look something like this. Okay, although of course it would be wider because we have another millimeter of thickness on our piece. So it would look something like that. This is a pretty low profile dome. I would like more elevation than that. I think I would like it to be more like this. Be watching where you see the cursor. Since I have symmetry on, it's over here on the right that I'm drawing. It's going to be confusing if you look over there on the left. Okay, so I know I want that kind of an elevation. So I can drag a construction line, a guideline here in Photoshop from the ruler, put it there as a reference, and then I can go ahead and draw this. Now a couple of things become apparent right away. One is that there's more swelling here, more of a waist, or less of a waist if you want, on this shoulder. I want it to come up nice and full. Also, since I know my bezel, and I am going to use the bezel set, since I know my bezel is here, I'm going to want to have a fairly low amount of dome, or rounding on the shoulder, I should say, where that bezel is at, and then I'm going to want it to come down. And give me the rest of that shape. And I think that's a reasonably good shape. I like that. So the only thing I need to do now is I need to be able to move that stone up into place. So I'm going to get my selection tool out, and I'm going to make a selection on this layer where my template is, layer 1, and going to copy and paste in location, Control Shift V, and then move it up. I want to have a nice lip here for that bezel so that the setter will have room to push it over. Somewhere in that area is fine. I would also like this to stand out on top, so I'm going to move it to the top of the stack. Unfortunately, because it was copied at a transparent level, I'm getting even though the opacity is now at 100%, I am getting something I don't care for. So I'm going to throw that away and temporarily boost that opacity all the way back up, so that now when I copy and paste and put it up here, it will do what I want it to do. I do want this to be a multiply layer so I can see through it. Be aware that when you change things over here, if you start hitting your arrow keys, it's going to just change your mode. So instead of that, reach over and just tap in your background here, and you'll be able to use keyboard to adjust the position, which is my preferred way of working. Okay, so I have that. So I'm going to clean up a little bit. Okay, I'm still on the curves layer. where I did my drawing. I'm going to come up here now and clean out some of this bezel. And then I'm going to come down to my tracing. Now I actually have, good, I only have the side-to-side symmetry tool going. Otherwise, I could have ran into trouble there and increase the size of my brush so I can clean this up more quickly. Okay, I have this arc is from the layer above. There. That's a pretty good sketch. It's a little bit off now because the shoulders for this ring would now come over to here. The quickest way for me to remedy that, given the amount of time I have, would be to copy and paste and then move it out. But for now, I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to be aware in my sketch that these two don't really line up. I'll be working this out in Rhino later. Also, but for your homework, I expect you to clean this up. I'm just running it. What the heck. I will go ahead and do it. Otherwise, it's confusing. So dual axis symmetry, moving this back into position for the traditional top view. Using the mouse so I can get in there nice and tight. The more you zoom in, the more precisely you can put that down. That's good enough. And now, having that information about the increased widths, I can go in and modify that top view. And the brush is quite heavy because I set it to erase. I want to really try and duplicate the effect I have here, because as far as the shape, because if I don't do that, I'll be creating a different width in the side view, because I don't want to change the cross section here at the shoulder. So there we go. Okay, last step is to do a side view quickly. Sketch that in. These are called developmental studies. So they're sketchy. They're just to help me think this through and see if I like what I have. I need to borrow. I mean, I could use a guideline and transfer all this. Like a miter line or a break line, whichever you want to call it for traditional drafting. But I don't need to do that. I'm actually just going to grab this whole section, going to do a Control-Shift-C so I copy everything down to the canvas, Control-Shift-V so it comes back in place, and then grab this, bring it down. Set to multiply so I can see through it. Rotate it 90 degrees. And then move it into position. And into position means that where this halfway line is, lines up with the halfway line on the side view. More or less. Okay, and now I don't want to have this anywhere near that opaque because I want it just to give me a suggestion. And I'll go ahead and drop it below the layer where I'm doing my sketch. So that gives me an indication of where it would go. Now I need to set up my symmetry tool. To correspond with this view. Okay. Go into brush mode, and now I can draw the side view. I know that this starts out actually this thick. I know this thickness will run all the way down to where the finger bore begins. And then it will taper. This part of the taper will stay pretty much as it looks. In the flattened top view. Okay. So down to here, it's going to be about the same. At the bottom, however, we can see that we made the bottom of this shank using this information here, that we made the bottom of this shank about like this, and the thickness of that section is going to be about right here. So something like that is going on at the bottom. So, and once again, like we did on the top over here, I need to allow for a little bit of material so I get a smooth transition into there. And that's good. The only thing I need to do now is I need to get a copy of this bezel. Make sure I'm on the right layer. Copy, paste, move it to the top. And move it into position. I could drag down another guideline to reference this, but I really don't need to. This is once again a sketch, so close is good. That's fine. I'm going to want to take that into multiply again so I can see through it. Now, this layer right here that I used to help me understand that side view, I can now delete, so I don't have that to fight with. I'm going to do some erasing, so I'm going to set my brush size back up to a larger pixel number. I'm going to come in and I'm going to clean up a lot of this. Now I can actually do that also with just a selection tool. Select cut to remove that. I can do that same thing here. I do not want to remove my guidelines, I mean the bezel there. And then I can come with the brush and do a more careful job of cleaning this out and then going up to that top layer and cleaning out some of this. Now, what's going to happen where this runs into the shank is going to be a little bit different, because this is biting into a straight flat plane, which is not what's happening in our drawing anymore. So, going to bring, with a reasonably sized brush, going to bring the bezel down. And then here, our cross section in here isn't flat. It's domed. And where it's going to meet the shank is not as low. It's going to meet right here. So we want to draw or kind of sketch what we think the cross section of the shank is right there. Use that to inform what we do with the bottom of our bezel. Which will end up looking and actually, we want to pay attention, once again, it meets here on the shank in front. So actually, we need to revise this. So that we get something more like that. Now, is that perfect? Probably not. But it's enough for us to have an idea of what this thing is supposed to look like, so when we do our maquette and eventual modeling of this shape. Okay. And that's it. That's a finished sketch of our dome ring for Ladies Collar. Thanks for watching.